we talk about tribes, right? We talk about ethnic violence, ethnic strife. So on the surface, what's wrong with that? We may say, well, there's nothing wrong. But Africa is the only continent we define by color. There's no white Europe, there's no yellow Asia, there's no brown Latin America, right? So you wonder, why is black Africa in there? So you see what I'm saying? There's a differentiation that has ramification, or ramifications. I'm a policy guy, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, so I pay attention to words and what they mean. So when we use a word like tribe, the first value is just a word, like any other word. A word is a word. But a word carries a connotation, and sometimes connotations. So if you're talking about tribe, then what comes to mind is people with faces painted and dancing and you know? Some stuff we don't understand, which means they're primitive, which means they don't understand the stakes. They don't understand what is good for them. They're still living in that visceral, primordial world. That is not true. So if we embrace that way of thinking, immediately when there's a conflict, we call it ethnic strife, right? We don't think of those people as humans like us. It's not typically the intent, the intent for most of people who use those kind of words. They've just kind of fallen into this discourse. But the ramification is huge. So when Hutu and Tutsi start fighting, quickly we have to find a way to fit it in this frame of tribe and Africa. What that means for policymakers sitting in Washington, D.C., there's nothing new. These people have been fighting for time immemorial, right? This is what they do. They're savages. They live in the bush. They don't quite understand the way the world works. So this is when Sarkozy shows up in Dakar and he says, you know, this was a few years ago, that Africa has not entered history. Imagine that. French president, with all the colonial holdings of France, you know, but he says Africa is not entered history. Of course, there was a big brouhaha about that stuff. But if the French president thinks Africa is not entered history, then God forbid, where are we going? Because by the time we get to Washington, that's a whole different story. Because that's totally a different planet over there named Africa. So then we analyze the conflict, whatever. I'm just using the history of the Rwanda here, Rwanda with the Hutu and the Tutsi. They've been doing this forever. It's about ethnic. It's about the tall people and the short people, people with longer nose and flat nose. But that's not it. The Tutsis, the Kran in Liberia, in Congo, the Banyamulenge, whatever, everybody else is fighting for the same thing. What humans have been always fighting for. Access to power, controlling the other, access to education, access to resources, no to domination, is the same thing. So what this means is like in order for us to make sense of Africa and understand it, we need to put it in the global space where it belongs. And once we start doing that, we see Africa as we see everything else. The laziness of our analysis disappears. I remember being at school one time and I met some Spaniard and he said, the problem with Africa is that you guys have tribes. I said, yeah, we do, but there's no more tribal than Spain. Yeah, he didn't know that I lived in Spain. So the guy's like, what do you mean there are more tribals in Spain? We don't have tribes in Spain. I say, sure, what you call Catalan. Yeah, they refuse to be Spanish. You know, what do you call the Scots? You know, Braveheart is not dead. You know, we're still fighting for our own autonomy in Scotland. When it happened in Scotland, we call it struggle for self-determination. They have referendum. When the Igbo decide we don't want to be part of Nigeria, at least we want a level of autonomy, we say, no, those guys, ethnic violence. Right? There are more Igbos than there are Scots, I can bet you that. Right? But they're still into that tribal framework that I'm talking about. So we don't quite see them as people who know what the stakes are and what is good for them. Right? So we're going to fit them in there. Portugal is a small country. It's not even the smallest province in Congo is about 3 times bigger than Portugal. Yeah, but that's considered a nation, right? But the Congo people will not be considered a nation by our definition. Yeah. So you look at the UK, for those of you who play soccer, the UK does not go to the World Cup as one country. Yeah, Scotland goes to the UK, to the World Cup as a different flag, you know, white and blue. England goes to the World Cup with the red and white. They all carry the same passport, right? This is like Texas going to the World Series as Texas, and they will love that in Texas, right? So you see what I'm saying? The way we talk about these things become very important. People ask you, how many languages do you speak? Or they actually don't say that. They say, how many dialects do you speak? Right? It's very offensive. People don't realize that. But it's like, no, these are not dialects. These are languages. Again, the ramification. People think those words mean the same thing. They don't. A dialect is what you speak in Maine. Right? A dialect of... So you start realizing the picture. So there's always, we're going to take you just one notch down. Yeah, it's always a little bit notch down. Oh, you want independence? No, it's ethnic strife. I remember watching CNN and this was during the Kosovo War. And CNN is interviewing one of the warlords. Of course, we don't call them warlords, huh? Because it's Serbia. You know, that term doesn't exist. They're not militias. That's what you reserve for Congo and Liberia and Sierra Leone, right? Not in Bosnia. So the guy says, very upset with the judge, says, you know, I don't understand why the media treat us like this. We are not some African tribes. We are Serbs. While they were butchering Kosovars, right? So you see the liberty that people take even the way they think.